The mystery of the dark road. The road cut through the night like a scar, swallowed by darkness on either side. The only sound was the hum of Sarah's engine and the faint rattle of the loose dashboard. The clock blinked 2:59 a.m. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, thinking it might be a notification or some late-night spam. Instead, a single message appeared on the screen. "Turn back now, before it's too late." No number. No name. Her breath caught in her throat. Before she could react, the headlights cut through the gloom ahead and revealed her. She stood barefoot in the middle of the road, draped in a white gown. Her long, tangled hair obscured her face, but she was perfectly still, like a statue carved from shadow and light. Sarah slammed the brakes, tires screeching as the car jerked to a halt. The woman didn't move. The air in the car felt suffocating. Sarah gripped the steering wheel as the woman slowly raised a hand and pointed to the forest lining the road. In a voice that seemed to echo from nowhere, the woman whispered, "They're waiting." Sarah's instinct screamed at her to drive away, to forget she'd ever seen this, but her curiosity, her fear, something stronger made her reach for the door handle. The cold night air stung her skin as her feet hit the ground. The woman turned and began walking into the forest, her bare feet silent against the earth. Sarah hesitated, then followed. The trees loomed above her like towering shadows, their twisted branches reaching for the sky. The flashlight in her hand barely cut through the darkness. "Who's waiting?" Sarah called, her voice trembling. The woman didn't answer. She walked silently until they reached a clearing. There in the center stood an old house. Its roof sagged under years of decay, and its windows were like black staring eyes. The woman stopped. Without turning, she whispered, "Go inside," and then she vanished. The door hung ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. Sarah pushed it open, and the stench of rot hit her like a physical blow. Inside, the air felt heavy, suffused with an eerie silence. A rocking chair moved in the corner, swaying gently, though no one was there. Sarah's flashlight caught a family portrait hanging crooked on the wall. The faces were blurred, their eyes scratched out. A faint giggle echoed from upstairs. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself forward, the wooden stairs groaning beneath her weight. At the top of the stairs, a door stood slightly open, faint light spilling from within. Sarah stepped inside. Toys littered the floor, dolls with missing eyes, teddy bears torn apart at the seams. In the corner sat a boy, his back turned to her. He was humming a low, off-key tune. Who are you?" Sarah whispered. The boy stopped humming. Slowly he turned his head. His face was pale, his eyes dark and hollow. "They won't let you leave," he said, his voice flat and cold. The door behind her slammed shut. The room grew icy, her breath visible in the flickering light. The toys on the floor began to move. One by one, their broken limbs twisted unnaturally, dragging themselves toward her. A low, guttural growl rumbled through the air. Sarah backed against the wall, her hand fumbling for the door handle. She wrenched it open and bolted down the stairs, nearly tripping in her desperation. She burst out into the night, gasping for air. Throwing herself into the car, she slammed the door and started the engine. The tires screeched as she sped away, the house vanishing into the darkness. Relief flooded her chest. She was safe. But then, in the rearview mirror, she saw him. He was sitting in the back seat, his hollow eyes glowing faintly. "You can't leave," he whispered, his voice echoing in the stillness. Sarah's scream shattered the silence of the dark road, but it only seemed to amuse the boy. His hollow eyes gleamed in the dim light as a slow smile spread across his pale face. She swerved violently, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. The car veered dangerously close to the edge of the road. "Get out," she shouted, her voice cracking. The boy didn't flinch. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked softly. The headlights flickered. The car began to sputter, and the engine gave a violent jolt before cutting off entirely. Sarah slammed her fists against the wheel. "No, no, no!" The road ahead was now shrouded in impenetrable darkness. The faint glow of the moon did little to light the vast expanse of trees surrounding her. She turned in her seat. The boy was gone. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Had she imagined it? Was the forest playing tricks on her mind? She fumbled for her phone, desperate to call for help. The screen flickered to life, but before she could dial, a message appeared. "You can't run." The phone buzzed again. This time, a single image filled the screen. It was her car parked in the middle of the road, taken from above. Her heart nearly stopped. The photo was live. The timestamp showed it had been taken seconds ago. A faint knock on the driver's side window made her jump. The woman in the white gown stood there, her face still obscured by her long, tangled hair. Sarah froze, every muscle in her body locking up. The woman's hand pressed gently against the glass, her fingers pale and cold. Slowly, she tilted her head toward the woods. Sarah locked the doors, her hand trembling on the button. "I'm not going back there," she whispered to herself. But the woman's voice drifted into the car, clear and haunting. "You have no choice." The locks on the doors clicked open on their own. The interior lights flickered erratically. The air grew colder, each breath visible as a fine mist. Sarah grabbed the flashlight from the passenger seat and stepped out of the car, her legs shaky. The woman turned and began walking back toward the forest without waiting for her. Sarah followed, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. The forest was eerily silent, the usual sounds of night, crickets, wind, the rustling of leaves, absent. The further they went, the stranger the surroundings became. The trees twisted unnaturally, their branches forming impossible shapes. The ground beneath her feet felt soft, as though it were breathing. "Where are we going?" Sarah demanded, her voice hoarse. The woman stopped abruptly, her head tilting slightly to one side. "They want to meet you," she said. Before Sarah could ask who they were, the woman dissolved into a cloud of mist, vanishing into the air. Sarah's flashlight flickered, and she was plunged into darkness. Panic surged through her, but before she could retreat, a faint glow appeared in the distance. It pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Against her better judgment, Sarah moved toward the light. She emerged into another clearing, but this one was different. Small, decrepit houses circled a central well, their wooden walls warped and covered in moss. Flickering lanterns hung from crooked poles, casting an eerie glow over the scene. Figures moved in and out of the shadows. People, or what once might have been people. Their faces were obscured, their forms distorted, as though they were partially submerged in water. A child ran past her, giggling. It was the boy from the house. "Wait," Sarah called, chasing after him. He darted into one of the houses, and she hesitated at the threshold. The doorway seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as though alive. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped inside. The interior was unlike anything she expected. It was vast, endless, filled with corridors that stretched into infinity. The air was thick and humid, each breath feeling like a struggle. The boy's laughter echoed from somewhere deeper within. "Who are you?" Sarah shouted. "What do you want from me?" Her voice bounced back at her, distorted and layered, as though 100 versions of herself were speaking at once. She moved forward, the walls closing in around her. They seemed to pulse, like veins filled with blood. At the end of the corridor, a door stood ajar, a faint red glow spilling out. Inside, she found a large room filled with mirrors. Each one reflected a different version of herself, some crying, others screaming, a few standing motionless with hollow eyes. In the center of the room stood the boy. "This is where it begins," he said. The boy held out his hand. In it was an old, rusted key. "You have to choose," he said. "Choose what?" Sarah demanded, her voice shaking. The boy gestured to the mirrors. "A life for a life. If you want to leave, someone must stay." The weight of his words sank in. Sarah's mind raced. She wanted to scream, to deny what she was hearing, but deep down she knew there was no escaping this place without a price. "Who are you?" she whispered. The boy smiled, his teeth sharp and jagged. "We are the ones who watch, the ones who wait. And now you're one of us." Sarah grabbed the key, desperate to end this nightmare. The boy laughed, the sound echoing around her as the mirrors shattered, glass flying in every direction. The ground beneath her feet crumbled, and she fell into darkness. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her car. The clock read 3 a.m. The road stretched ahead, silent and empty. The forest was gone, replaced by the familiar highway. Had it all been a dream? She exhaled shakily and turned on the ignition. The car started without issue, and she began driving. But as she glanced in the rearview mirror, she froze. In the back seat sat the woman in white, her hair parted to reveal a face. Sarah's own face, pale and lifeless. "You can never leave," the woman whispered.